All right, friends, I already looked over and responded on your opinion question. I decided not to take it for a grade because it was an opinion, so I didn't think that was very fair. Um, I already returned those to you and commented on it, except for two of you, because two of you didn't do it. So if you're the person that didn't do it, make sure you get it done. But everyone else, you got it done, and I've already returned it to you. And some of you guys I made comments for. Stop typing in the chat now because it's officially started. We're gonna get reading today because that's what I want to do today is just read. So remember, they just found that note. They don't know who the note is for. That other guy just like showed up at their house. Like, weird times happening. We are now on chapter 10, which is Huzzah, Huzzah. I had just finished telling Graham and Gramps about the mysterious message when Gramps pulled off the freeway. He said he was tired of chewing on the road and the white lines down the middle of the highway were starting to wiggle. So basically, he's just getting tired. And sometimes when you drive and drive and drive, like the roads, you start seeing things. And then that's a good time to take a break from driving. As he drove into Madison, Wisconsin, Graham said, I feel a little sorry for Mrs. Winterbottom. She doesn't sound very happy. They all sound screwy, if you ask me, Graham said. Being a mother is like trying to hold a wolf by the ears, Graham said. If you have 3 or 4 or more chickabiddies, you're dancing on hot griddle all the time. You don't have time to think about anything else. And if you've only got 1 or 2, it's almost harder. You have room left over, empty space that you think you've got to fill up. Well, it sure ain't a cinch being a father either, Gramps said. Gramps touched his arms. Horse feathers, she said. Round and round we drove until Gramps saw a parking space. Another car saw it too, but Gramps was fast and pulled in. And when the man in the other car waved his fist, Gramps said, I'm a veteran. You see this leg? Shrapnel from German guns. I saved our country. We did not have correct change for the parking meter, so Gramps wrote a long note about how he was a visitor from Bybanks, Kentucky, and how he was a World War II veteran with German shrapnel in his legs, and he'd kindly appreciate the member of the fair city of Madison allowing him to park in this space, even though he did not have the correct change for the meter. He put this note on his dashboard. Do you really have German shrapnel in your leg? I asked. Gramps looked up to the sky. Mighty nice day, he said. The shrapnel was imaginary. So, a parking meter, if you don't know what that is, in cities, you have to like pay to park, city life. And like the money is then used to like repave roads and things like that. So they don't have the correct change because parking meters, you can just slide your debit card. But back then, you needed correct change. He didn't have the change, so Gramps just made this little big old fib about how he has German shrapnel in his leg and how, we're visitors. They are visitors, and how, blah, 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 don't write us a ticket. We'll see if that works. Sometimes I am a little slow to figure out these things. My father once said I was as gullible as a fish. I thought he said edible. I thought he meant I was tasty. That's funny. Some people are more gullible than others, especially when you're young, you're super gullible. I can think of times when I was told, so gullible means when you're told something that isn't true and you like believe it anyways, because like you just didn't realize that they were like fibbing or being sarcastic or something. One time I was super gullible was when I was dating my husband, like we're married now. One time we were dating. This is just fun, Mrs. Kneifel story. He told me, dead serious, he was like, Abigail, which is my first name. He said, did you know that if you fall asleep while driving and get in a car accident, it's not your fault because you weren't actually there to see it? And I was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. Of course, you're asleep. You didn't know. But that's not true. If you fall asleep while driving and get in a car accident, it is your fault because you were not responsible and you fell asleep while driving. So, but that was something Mrs. Kneifel believed. That was a gullible moment in Mrs. Kneifel's life. But we have all been gullible before in our lives, and just be thinking in your brain, when was a time that you were gullible? Mrs. Kneifel definitely, if you're like some people are more gullible than others. If you're a trusting person, you're probably a little bit more gullible because you just believe what people say because you trust people, which is okay. So Mrs. Kneifel's definitely been a gullible person. So, Sal's dad is like, you're as gullible as a fish, which I've never heard that expression before this book, but whatever. You're super gullible. It means she believes whatever people are telling her, which probably means she's a trusting person. The city of Madison sprawls between two lakes, Lake Manitoba and Lake Monana, whatever that word is. And dribbling out of these are other piddly lakes. Piddly would mean like tiny. It seems as if the whole city was on vacation, with people riding around on their bikes, walking around the lakes, and feeding the ducks, and eating and canoeing and windsurfing. I'd never seen anything like it. Grandma kept saying, huzzah, huzzah. There's a part of the city where no cars can go, and thousands of people stroll around eating ice cream. We went into Ella's Kosher Deli and ice cream parlor and ate pastrami sandwiches and kosher dill pickles, followed by raspberry ice cream. After, we walked around some more. We were hungry again, so we went and had lemon tea and blueberry muffins at the Steep and Brew. After a while, I heard the whispers, rush, hurry, rush. Graham and Gramps moved so slowly. Shouldn't we go now? I kept asking, but Grandma would say, huzzah, huzzah. And Gramps would say, we'll go soon, Chickabiddy. Soon. So, Madison, Wisconsin. A lot of people do vacation there. Like, that's a big place. Not a big place, but it's the capital of Wisconsin. People do go there. That's a real place. So they're just having a lovely vacation time. They're eating, having ice cream, having tea, great time, looking at all the stuff. And then all of a sudden, the urgency comes back to Sal when, she's hearing that rush, rush, hurry, hurry again. So for like a little while, she was able to calm down and relax and enjoy this little trip. And then she was instantly back to, oh no, we need to hurry. Do you want to send any postcards, Graham asked. No, I do not. Not even to your daddy? No. There was a good reason for this. All along her trip, my mother had sent me postcards. She wrote, here I am in the Badlands, missing you terribly. And this is Mount Rushmore, but I don't see any presidents' faces. I only see yours. The last postcard arrived 2 days after we found out she wasn't coming back. It was from Cordial, Idaho. On the front was a picture of a beautiful blue lake surrounded by tall evergreens. On the back, she'd written, tomorrow I'll be in Lewiston. I love you, my Salamonica tree. At last, Gramps said, I sure hate to get back on the road, but time's a-wasting. Yes, I thought, yes. Gramps settled back for a nap while I said a few thousand more prayers. The next thing I knew, Gramps was pulling off the road again. Looky here, he said, the Wisconsin Dells. He drove into a vast parking area and said, why don't you two go look around? I'm going to get a little shut-eye. Graham and I poked our noses into an old fort and then sat on the grass watching a group of Native Americans dance and beat drums. My mother had not liked the term Native American. She thought it sounded primitive and stiff. She said, my great-grandmother was a Seneca Indian, and I am proud of it. She wasn't a Seneca Native American. Indian, it sounds much more brave and elegant. In school, our teacher told us we had to say Native Americans, but I agree with my mother. Indian sounded much better. My mother and I liked this Indianness in our backgrounds. She said it made us appreciate the gifts of nature. It made us closer to the land. I lay back and closed my eyes, listening to the drums beat, rush, 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 and the dancers chant, hurry, hurry, hurry. Obviously, drums aren't really saying rush, 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 and the dancers aren't really saying hurry, hurry, hurry. That's just, she's hearing the beat, and that's what she's thinking in her head. Someone was jingling bells, too, and for a moment I thought of Christmas and sleigh bells. When I opened my eyes again, Gramps was gone. Oh, snap. Gramps, MIA. We don't want to lose old people, okay? So I glanced around, trying to remember where we had parked the car. I looked through the crowd, back at the trees, over at the concession stand. They're gone, I thought. They've left me. I pushed through the people. The crowd was clapping. The drums were beating. I was all turned around and could not remember which way we had come. There were 3 signs indicating different parking areas. The drums thundered. I pushed further into the crowd of people. Who were now clapping louder in time with the drums. The Indians had formed 2 circles, one circle inside the other, and were hopping up and down. The man danced in the outer circle and wore feathers and headdresses and short leather aprons. On their feet were moccasins. I thought again about Phoebe's message. Don't judge a man until you've walked 2 moons in his moccasins. Inside the circle of men, the women in long dresses and ropes with beads had joined arms and were dancing around one older woman who was wearing a regular cotton dress. On her head was an enormous headdress which had slipped down over her forehead. I looked closer. The woman in the center was hopping up and down. On her feet were flat white shoes. In the space between drum beats, I heard her say, "Huzzah, huzzah." So where'd Grandma go? Well, she joined the Native Americans dancing. She's having herself a grand old time. She's on vacation. So Sal closed her eyes for just a minute. She could have like dozed off or something. But anyways, closed her eyes. Then all of a sudden Grams was gone and she instantly felt a panic. Like, would her grandparents leave her? No. Like, she's in a strange, she's at the Wisconsin Dells. Obviously they're not going to leave her. But she's so panicked about getting to Lewiston, Idaho to get to where her mother is. She just panicked and she instantly forgot where she had come from and all this stuff, panicking, and well, she found her grandmother dancing, having a grand old time. So remember, her grandparents are her dad's parents are not the Native American ones. Her mother's parents are the Native American ones. So Sal gets her Native American side from her mother. So this grandma, her dad's mom, the Huzzah Huzzah, she's not the one that's Native American, but she's just having still a grand old time dancing with the Native Americans. Chapter 11 is flinching. Early next morning, we left Wisconsin and drove on, eating up the road through the lower rim of Minnesota. The land there was hilly, green, forest tucked in close beside the road, and the air smelled of pine. At last, Graham said, "Some scenery. I love a place that has some scenery. Don't you, Chickabiddy?" Scenery is like what you see while driving. Some highways are so beautiful. Some roadways are so beautiful. There's so much to see. And some are really boring, and all there is road. Depends. I had not said anything about what had happened the day before, about being scared down to my very bones when I thought they'd left me. I don't know what came over me. Ever since my mother left us that April day, I suspect that everyone is going to leave one by one. I was glad to be able to go on with Phoebe's story because when I was talking about Phoebe, I wasn't thinking about much else. Did Phoebe get any more messages? Graham asked. Once again, Graham still doesn't know her name. Cracks me up. She did. The following Saturday, Phoebe and I were going to Mary Lou's again, and as we left Phoebe's house, there on the front step was another white envelope with a blue sheet of paper inside. The message was, "Everyone has his own agenda." I want you to think about what that means for a second. Remember, agenda, you have one written on your board in your classroom right now. Agenda is like what you're doing for the day, but agenda is also like what you're set out to do, what your goals and stuff. So it's saying everyone has his own agenda, meaning everyone is trying to accomplish their own things. Everyone, I don't know. When I think about everyone has his own agenda, I just think it reminds me of how selfish people are. Like even if we're all working towards the same goal, you may want something else out of it. I don't know. So everyone has his own agenda. Phoebe and I looked up and down the street. There was no sign of a message leaver. Mary Lou thought the message, this one and the other one, were intriguing. "How exciting," she said. "I wish someone would leave me messages." Phoebe thought the messages were spooky. It was not the word that bothered her. Nothing too frightening there. It was the idea that someone was sneaking around and leaving them on her porch. She worried that someone was watching their house, waiting for the right moment to leave the message. Phoebe was a champion worrier. Most of you said in your post or in your Google Classroom message yesterday that you agree that Phoebe has crazy, vivid imagination, because she does. Like, well, I do too think it's weird if someone was leaving notes on my front porch, because then, like, when are they leaving them? Like, that is weird. So hopefully no one's doing that to you. But still, she's like so panicked, She doesn't find it interesting at all. She's a champion worrier. I would agree with that. Her and her mother are definitely some worrisome people. We tried to figure out what the message meant. "Okay," Phoebe said. "An agenda is a list of things to be discussed at a meeting." That is true. An agenda can also be like what you're going to talk about in a meeting. An agenda can also be what you're going to do for the day. "So maybe it's for your dad, I suggest. Does he go to meetings?" "Well, I guess," Phoebe said. "He's ever so busy all day long." Maybe it's from his boss," Mary Lou said. "Maybe your father hasn't been conducting his meetings very well." My father is very organized, Phoebe said. What about the other message? Mary Lou said, don't judge a man until you've walked 2 moons in his moccasins. I know what it means, I said. I heard my father use it lots of times. I used to imagine that there were 2 moons sitting in a pair of Indian shoes. So my father said it means that you shouldn't judge someone until you've walked in their moccasins, until you've walked in their shoes, in their place. And your father says this often, Phoebe says. I know what you're thinking, I said, but my father isn't creeping around leaving those messages. It isn't his handwriting. When Ben came into Mary Lou's room, she asked him what he thought it meant. He took out a sheet of paper from her desk and quickly drew a cartoon. It was a little spooky because what he drew was identical to what I used to imagine, a pair of Indian moccasins with 2 moons in them. Maybe, Mary Lou said to Phoebe, your father is being too quick to judge people at work. He needs to walk in their moccasins first. My father does not judge too quickly, Phoebe said. You don't have to get defensive, Ben said. I'm not getting defensive. I'm just telling you that my father does not judge too quickly. Phoebe, clearly you're being defensive. Take a chill. Later, we went to the drugstore. I thought it was going to be only me, Phoebe, and Mary Lou, but by the time we left the house, we had accumulated, that means like added to, Tommy and Dougie as well. At last minute, Ben said he was coming too. I don't know how you can stand it, Phoebe said to Mary Lou. Stand what? Phoebe pointed to Tommy and Dougie, who were running around like wound-up toys, making airplane noises and train noises and zooming in between us, and then running ahead and falling all over each other, crying, then leaping back up again, socking each other and chasing around bumblebees. I'm used to it, Mary Lou said. My brothers are always doing beef brain things. If you have any little siblings in your life or have ever spent time with little kids or even older siblings with you, if you have siblings, basically, you know siblings could do awfully crazy things, running around each other, making noise, especially little ones. They don't really realize what's happening around them. So Phoebe, who only has an older sister and her family is like prim and proper, she's like, I don't understand how you could be around all this noise. You know, they're not acting perfect. And Mary Lou's like, they're fine. You know, they're kids. Like, who cares? She's used to it. Ben walked right behind me all the way, which made me nervous. I kept turning around to see what he was doing back there, but he was just strolling along, smiling. Tommy bashed into me, and when I started to fall backwards, Ben caught me. He put his arm around my waist and held on to me, even after it was obvious that I was not going to fall. I could smell the funny grapefruit smell again, and feel his face pressed against my hair. Let go, I said, but he didn't let go. I had an odd sensation, as if a little creature was crawling up my spine. It wasn't a horrible sensation, more light and tricky. I thought maybe he'd drop something down my shirt. Let go, I said, and he finally did. So I don't know about you, but I think Ben has a little crush on Sal. I don't know if any of you guys have caught that, but I think that Ben has a little crush. At the drugstore, I got a little scared. Oh, side note, if you're ever touching someone and someone says let go, you should let go first time. They shouldn't have to be asked once. And it's COVID anyway, so don't touch people. But besides the point, Ben clearly loving some Sal. It was at the drugstore that I got a little scared. Maybe I was listening to Phoebe's tales of lunatics and axe murderers too much. Phoebe and I were looking at magazines when I felt as if someone was watching us. I looked over to where Ben was standing, but he and Mary Lou were busy rummaging around in the chocolate bars. The feeling did not go away. I turned the other way around, and there, on the far side of the store, was the nervous young man who had come to Phoebe's house. He was at the cash register paying for something, but he was staring at us while he was handing his money at the clerk. I nudged Phoebe. Oh no, she said. The lunatic. Phoebe hustled over to Ben and Mary Lou. Look, quick, it's the lunatic. Where? At the cash register. There's nobody there, Mary Lou said. Honest. He was there, Phoebe said. I swear he was. Ask Sal. He was there, I said. Later, when we had left Mary Lou and were on our way to Phoebe's house, we heard someone running up behind us. Phoebe thought we were doomed. If we get our heads bashed in and the lunatic leaves us on the sidewalk, she said. I felt a hand on my shoulder and I opened my mouth to scream, but nothing came out. My brain was saying, scream, scream, but my voice was completely shut off. It was Ben. He said, did I scare you? That wasn't funny, Phoebe said. I'll walk home with you, he said, just in case there's any lunatic around. He had a difficulty saying lunatic. The way to Phoebe's house, Ben said some odd things. First, he said, maybe you shouldn't call him a lunatic. And why not, Phoebe said. Because a lunatic it sounds like, oh never mind. He would not explain, and he seemed embarrassed to have mentioned it in the first place. Then he said, Don't people touch other people at your house? What's that supposed to mean? I just wondered, he said. You flinch every time someone touches you. I do not. You do. He touched my arm. I have to admit, my instinct was to flinch, but I caught myself. I pretended not to notice that his hand was resting there on my arm. That creature tickling my spine was back. He said, like a doctor examining my patient. He removed his hand. Where's your mother? I had not mentioned my mother to anyone, not even Phoebe, except for the one time Phoebe had asked about her, and I had only said she didn't live with us. Ben said, I saw your father once, but I've never seen your mother. Where is she? She's in Idaho, Lewiston, Idaho. What's she doing there? Ben said. I really don't feel like saying. It didn't occur to me to ask him where his mother is. Remember, Ben lives with Phoebe's family, so where's the heck is his family? He touched my arm again. When I flinched, he said, Ha, gotcha. It bothered me what he had said. It occurred to me that my father didn't hug me as much anymore, and that maybe I was starting to flinch whenever someone touched me. It wasn't always like that. We used to be a hugging family. As I walked along with Ben and Phoebe, I remembered a time when I was 9 or 10. My mother crawled into bed with me and snuggled close and said, Let's build a raft and float away down a river. I used to think about that raft a lot, and I actually believed that one day we might build a raft and float away down a river together. But when she went to Lewiston, Idaho, she went alone. Ben touched Phoebe's arm. She flinched. Ha, he said, Gotcha. You're jumpy too, Freebie. And that too bothered me. I had already noticed how tense Phoebe's whole family seemed, how tidy, how respectable, how thrumpety stiff. Was I becoming like that? Why were they like that? A couple times I had seen Phoebe's mother try to touch Phoebe or Prudence or Mr. Winterbottom, and they all drew back from her. It was like they had outgrown her. Had I been drawing away from my own mother? Did she have empty spaces left over? Was that why she left? When we reached Phoebe's driveway, Ben said, I guess you're safe now. I guess I'll go. Go ahead, Phoebe said. So let's just take a minute there. Some people are more touchy-feely than others, and that's fine. Some families are definitely hugging families. Some families are not. My family, personally, growing up, definitely not touchy-feely families. I don't love to be touched by other people. I don't love hugs from other people. It's just not my thing, and that's totally fine. So Ben's family, Mary Lou's family, definitely touchy-feely people. They love being around each other and everything like that, and Ben's with them as part of the family, so he's, totally fine. Prudence's and Phoebe's family, super stiff. They never hug each other. They never touch. And now, apparently, since Sal's mother has left for Lewiston, Idaho, she's become less touchy-feely, and now she's just panicked that she's becoming Phoebe, and she knows how, crazy Phoebe is, so she's so worried, oh my gosh, am I becoming like Phoebe? I don't want to be like Phoebe, so she's worried she's becoming more like Phoebe. Mrs. Cadaver came screeching up the curb in her yellow Volkswagen with her red witch hair flying all over the place. She waved at us and started pulling things out of the car and plopping them on the sidewalk. Who's that? Ben asked. Mrs. Cadaver. Cadaver? Like dead body? That's right. Hi, Sal, Mrs. Cadaver called. She dumped a pile of lumpy bags on the sidewalk. Ben asked if she wanted any help. My, you're very polite, Mrs. Cadaver said, flashing her wild gray eyes. She scares me half to death, Phoebe said. Don't go inside, she whispered to Ben. Why not? He said too loudly because Mrs. Cadaver looked up and said, What? Oh, nothing, Phoebe said. Mrs. Cadaver said, Sal, do you want to come in? I was just going to Phoebe's, I said, glad for an excuse. Phoebe's mother came to the front door. Phoebe, what are you doing? Are you coming in? We left Ben. As we were going into Phoebe's house, we saw Ben lifting something off the sidewalk. It was a shiny new axe. They think Mrs. Cadaver kills people. Now she's got a new axe, craziness. Phoebe's mother said, Is that Mary Lou's brother? Was he walking you home? Where's Mary Lou? I hate it when you ask me 3 questions in a row, Phoebe said. Through the window, we could see Ben lugging the axe up the front steps of Mrs. Cadaver's house. Phoebe called out, Don't go in! But when Mrs. Cadaver held the front door open, Ben disappeared inside. Phoebe, what are you doing? Her mother asked. Then Phoebe pulled the envelope out of her pocket, the envelope containing the newest message. I found this outside, Phoebe said. Mrs. Winterbottom opened the envelope carefully as if it might contain a miniature bomb. Oh, sweetie, she said. Who is it from? Who is it for? What does it mean? Phoebe explained what an agenda was. I know what an agenda is, Phoebe. I don't like this at all. I want to know who is sending these. I was waiting for Phoebe to tell her about seeing the nervous man at the drugstore, but Phoebe didn't mention it. A little later, we saw Ben leaving Mrs. Cadaver's house. He appeared to be all in one piece. That day when I got home, my father was in the garage tinkering with the car. He was leaning over the engine, and I couldn't see his face at first. Dad, what do you think it means if someone touches someone else and the person being touched flinches? Do you think it means that the person being touched is getting too stiff? Dad turned slowly around. His eyes were red and puffy. I think he'd been crying. His hands and shirt were greasy, but when he hugged me, I didn't flinch. So, Sal's dad, whatever he was upset about, maybe because he doesn't have his wife right now because she's in Lewiston, Idaho, had already been crying. So when she asked, like, what does it mean? Like, if, people aren't touching you, he probably thinks that she's referring to him about how they don't really hug anymore. So, he hugged her and she didn't flinch. So, we are going to stop there for today. No homework. I will see you guys in Reading RTI tomorrow. I love this book so much. I hope you guys are doing good. You think Mrs. Cadaver's Ben's mom? I don't think so. Mrs. Cadaver, we would know that. Mrs. Cadaver, Ben his parents can't take care of him, so he lives with Mary Lou's family. Goodbye. Peace out. Have a good day. See you soon.